da-da-da-da-da, drop it. All my rowdy friends are here tonight. Mark Thompson, Jake Huger, Emma Vigil, and everybody, TYT Politics. What is this? And John Idarola. Hey, John has so many nicknames, I couldn't pick one there in that half a second that I had.
I'll take that.
Lately, I've been accidentally rolling the Rolla and calling him Ida Lola. That's the latest. Okay.
That could be potentially damaging, yeah. John doesn't like any of them, which is the best part.
I think if we help it, it could be damaging, yeah.
Okay, all right. Lots of news. We laugh, although we are in a state of disaster in the world, and certainly in the Trump administration, where disaster is set in quite feverishly this week in particular. Earlier in the week, we were talking about how his communications director, Hope Hicks, is leaving, and so is H.R. McMaster, the national security director. In any other administration, that would be colossal, earth-shaking news where everyone would be asking, is everything all right? What in the world is going on? That is 2 of about 13 disasters that have happened this week. I don't know where Jared Kushner, the son-in-law's security clearance being downgraded ranks in those disasters, but it might be number 5 or 7. So, and then today, the disasters continue as the markets drop because of apparently an impromptu statement that Donald Trump made. We will explain that's on the tariffs, why he made that statement, why it's potentially disastrous. And then we've got Orrin Hatch attacking Democrats in outrageous ways and now backpedaling. There's so many things in the news constantly. Okay, and oh, by the way, did I mention corruption? So 2 giant stories of corruption at a minimum coming up. That's Emma's forte, by the way, in TYT Politics.
A little bit of it, yeah. It's depressing, but it's fun to talk about here.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a busy time for that particular beat.
Oh my gosh, they've taken all the veneer off of it. It used to be kind of in the shadows, but now they're just out front with it.
Yeah, what do you do all day long? Corruption.
Yep.
So luckily in your case, exposing it as opposed to participating in it.
You never know.
Well, okay, just let me know. Okay. All right, so having said all that, let's get started. John, what's up?
Obviously tons to get to. We've got a number of amazing updates from yesterday's announcement that there would be new tariffs on both steel and aluminum. 25% tariff on steel, 10% tariff on aluminum. Now, the first part is that there are very real concerns that this could spark some sort of new international trade war. And in fact, today we have indications that that might be underway. Officials in China are said to be considering some sort of strike back in the forms of tariffs or something related to that. But we already have details on one area. The president of the European Union said that they're going to be instituting new tariffs on products like Harley-Davidson's, Kentucky bourbon, and blue jeans. And I don't remember the exact breakdown, but for each of those, they are chiefly manufactured in the states of the leaders of the Senate and the House. So you have Pelosi, you have McConnell, and Ryan for those products. So they're sending a message, and there's some of sort of the most typically American products. But this is what we can expect, and indeed did expect when we were talking about this topic over the past couple of years. But despite that, Trump isn't worried at all about a trade war. He tweeted this morning. When a country, USA, he had to be clear, is losing many billions of dollars on trade with virtually every country it does business with, trade wars are good and easy to win. Example, when we are down 100 billion with a certain country and they get cute, don't trade anymore, we win big, it's easy.
Okay, I love that he put an example in because I was confused. And so when he gave me the example, I'm like, oh, well, that clarifies it, isn't it?
Just think of the cutest country you can think of. Clearly that's
Luxembourg.
I was thinking Japan, Hello Kitty, all that.
Yeah. So I was led to believe that trade was complicated and nuanced, but it turns out it's actually really easy. If you have a trade deficit with a country, stop trading with them and then you won't have a deficit. Yeah. Easy. No, that's not how it works. And so some people have a theory that Donald Trump is just trying to make it more simple that he could relate to his voters. No, he's not trying to he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
It's not for the purpose of his voters, for the edification or to appeal to them in some way. he does not understand complicated issues. In fact, he will come out and say things like, no one knew healthcare was complicated.
Yeah.
No, all the rest of us knew it was complicated except for you. So trade deficits are not as easy as, well, okay, we're down $100 billion in trade with China, for example, to pick a random cute country. And that means that if we stop trading, well, now we're even. No, that trade affects so many other industries inside the United States and has ramifications. It's not just a matter of, there's a deficit and we just wipe it out by not doing it. That is unbelievably, ridiculously, not just simplistic, but wrong.
Yeah, so you're implying that there might be some sorts of ripple effects, and indeed there are, and so we're gonna try to educate the president here. It turns out that while he seems to think that you set up this big tariff, and then the country, say China, just pays for it, and then the products continue on as they always have. That obviously isn't how it actually works, especially when you're talking about raw materials like steel and aluminum that are used in so many different products in the US. And so we're gonna do just a brief, and this is not nearly all encompassing. You can go and find more examples of this, an overview of different areas of the US economy already talking about how this is going to affect them. First, we have in the automotive industry. Auto sales have flattened in recent months and manufactured. This is from the American International Automobile Dealers Association President Cody Lusk. Auto sales have flattened in recent months and manufacturers are not prepared to absorb a sharp increase in the cost to build cars and trucks in America. Obviously, the burden of these tariffs, as always, will be passed on to the American consumer. Closes by saying this would place the US automotive industry, which supports more than 7 million American jobs, at a competitive disadvantage. And was it Wilbur Ross that went on TV today and said, oh, it'll just make your car a few $100s more, who cares about that? Well, perhaps the billionaires do not care about that, but for most people it will be significant. And you will be the one to pay for it, not the automotive industry. But it's not just cars, it's also smaller products that you're more likely to buy on a daily basis. Miller Coors, one of the biggest sellers of beers in America, says, we buy as much domestic canned sheet aluminum as is available. However, there simply isn't enough supply to satisfy the demands of American beverage makers like us. American workers and American consumers will suffer as a result of this misguided tariff. I'm not even gonna go through all of these, but you have the boating industry is concerned about this. You have the American Retail Manufacturers Association saying that no, this is gonna affect almost every industry, and what it is, in effect, is a tax on American consumers, every single American consumer. And the less money that you make, the more likely it is that you will spend all the money you make, and that means you will be affected far more than those higher up on the economic ladder.
Because so many things that are associated with things that we buy are made up of parts. It's not as though you're buying the entire thing, and many of those parts come from countries that we're now going to be in a trade war with. And as Cenk says, he doesn't understand our president. And by the way, I remember that rap about, oh, but he's a billionaire, and so he's going to know, so much about the economy. As it turns out, he doesn't know anything about the economy. He doesn't know any of the subtleties, he doesn't know any of the complexities. He was a bad businessman who had 6 bankruptcies and basically stiffed a bunch of contractors and ended up in court with them. So he's that kind of businessman, and now he's having to do real business. And the subtleties of a very delicate economic relationship with countries worldwide are lost on him. This is a war you can't win. He should just remember, you can't win any war. Economic war, trade war, or fighting war. And we would be better served, but he doesn't get that.
Yeah, and his focus on trade, it's not about making jobs come back to the United States. It's not about raising wages for American workers. It's really just about who's on top, who is going to win in this trade deficit. There's no progressive angle. Like when progressives criticize NAFTA or TPP, it's because it's giving out handouts to corporations, or it's essentially making wages lower and sending jobs overseas, making us compete with people in Mexico or China, et cetera. There's no nuance in that. It's just essentially, we're not winning with this. And it's also just an effort to kind of just say, I'm going after China too.
Yeah, so let me give you a little bit more context to it as well. So, okay, and it's not, by the way, a black and white issue. So under no circumstance would any tariff would ever make sense. And by the way, it's not just a right-wing or left-wing position. Some on the left are in favor of protectionism. And in fact, the labor unions like AFL-CIO applauded this move. So it's nuanced in the political landscape as well. But to give more context to what John was saying, all right, so let's say we protect our steel workers more, and you would, and that's why the labor unions and the steel companies are happy with it. But now your cars are more expensive. So wait, what happened to your trade deficit? Because now, not only are the cars more expensive inside the United States, but when you go to sell them in other places, they will also be more expensive, hence less people will buy them, which will create a larger trade deficit. So now let's look and say, is steel and aluminum bigger? Or are the products that steel and aluminum affect a bigger part of our industry? Well, there is an answer to that. The industries that use steel employ 80 times as many people as steel producing industries. So they affect 80 times as many employees as there are in the steel industry. Just that's on steel alone. So when you have that effect go all across our economy and affect our exports, this might ironically actually increase our trade deficits. Now, again, you'll have to see how it plays out and see, let alone the consequences of China and most especially the European Union and our allies like Canada who are enraged by this striking back, which would then have a different effect on our trade deficits and would move the numbers again. But Trump looks at it and goes, what do you mean? What do you mean? I do a tariff, then my steel is stronger. And then the trade deficit drops. That's not how it works. And it's unfortunate that we have a president who doesn't understand complicated policy matters and then makes decisions off the cuff on an issue of great importance for jobs and the entire world economy.
And what you just described isn't a solitary action either. We were talking earlier about the solar industry. And in a very similar way, he announced massive 30% tariffs on solar cells and sorts of technology that are brought into the US and then are used to install solar development and stuff like that. We need that stuff from outside of the US. And so to seemingly to protect the coal industry, maybe the oil industry, things like that, because we know that solar power is becoming far more cost competitive over the past few years. He puts up this big tariff and it's gonna end up costing more jobs from the solar industry than it will ever gain back in the coal industry. And it's possible over the next few years, you might lose more jobs from the solar industry than are currently working in the coal industry.
Oh, most certainly.
And yet that's what he went for. And if I could just quickly summarize, it's all willing to talk about the individual companies, and I think that we need to because I don't think people understand how many ripple effects this will have. But we know immediately what one indicator of the economy anyway thinks. Initially, stock markets took a nosedive early today after he doubled down on the tariffs in his early talk. We showed you one of those tweets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down roughly 300 points, and the S&P 500 also dropped more than half a percentage point. It's possible some of that might stabilize over time, but initially it certainly doesn't look like this is a very popular move. And we're gonna talk a little bit more, but we do have a far more personal component of this, an area of corruption that is gonna be very interesting.
Yeah, one last thing on what Emma mentioned. So the left is split on this in some ways, and it definitely matters how you do the execution. But one of the reasons that the left is opposed to a lot of these trade deals is not because of tariffs. Some on the left are, right? But I think the major concern, and certainly the one that I have, is who writes the trade deals. So it's not to say that we shouldn't have trade, that would be preposterous, right? So the question is, what's in the trade deals and who's in charge? So the main issue with, for example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership was that they were written largely by corporations. And in fact, for a long time, our congressmen were not even allowed to see the deal. And now when they were allowed to see it, they were not allowed to bring staff or lawyers or any help to look at the deal. Then you go, well, who's in charge and for whose benefit are we writing these deals? Because just because Coke is ostensibly an American company, which doesn't really mean anything, its shareholders are all across the world, doesn't mean that that benefits the American citizens. And the government is not supposed to be run by and for corporations, it's supposed to be run by and for people, the actual citizens. So those are the bigger issues in trade that, of course, Donald Trump doesn't touch and doesn't mind much because he likes the corporate donors. And so he's only done, in my opinion, the worst part of protectionism without actually doing the positive parts.
Yeah. And I will add that it may just dupe a few people. Unfortunately, the Democrats have pinned themselves into a corner by Hillary Clinton being for TPP and then kind of backing out of it, and Obama being a champion for it, and a lot of Democrats being for it. unions and people in the middle of the country hate that. And now Trump can at least put a feather in his cap and say, I did this. And so now Democrats look like the party of shipping job overseas, and Trump looks like, at least I'm putting tariffs on steel and making sure that we keep steel in the country or jobs in the country.
But these are trade agreements, and just like he was down on the Iranian nuclear deal, these are trade agreements that are in place. We do have trade relationships that have been codified. They've been, this is a real agreement. And I mentioned the Iran deal because just like that, he wants to swim away from that deal. And to whatever extent he wants to bust up these arrangements that we have with existing global partners on trade, people are going to be less trusting of the U.S. on future deals. So there is a ripple effect just from the standpoint of diplomacy and future economic and trade agreements that we'll make worldwide.
Yeah. And look, I oppose this for all the reasons that we've stated here. I think it's a bad idea overall, and I think the president doesn't understand all the consequences that'll flow for him. But I do want to give him credit on one thing. To Emma's point, he promised on the campaign trail that he would do tariffs. He's doing tariffs. So I think that is a populist position. It might not necessarily be a great policy position. The Democrats did get outflanked on it when it comes to unions and the average American worker. Now it might wind up having really bad consequences for our economy, in which case it'll blow up on Trump. But you do have to give him credit. Oftentimes politicians say one thing and do the other, which Trump has done on dozens of cases.
Every other issue.
But on this issue, he said he would do tariffs, and he did tariffs.
Okay, I'm not going to give him credit though.
Okay, just to be clear.
I'll be an army of one on that. Anyway, another incredibly interesting component of this. So Donald Trump announced his new round of steel and aluminum tariffs, and we know the economic impacts. The stocks of a lot of companies that are dependent on those materials dropped. Those companies now are going to have to charge higher prices. People are worried about that, and so the stocks go down, which means that if you're one of the people who've invested in those companies, you might have lost a lot of money. We're talking about a lot of different companies, a lot of different shareholders. It's really complicated. So to simplify it, let's talk about one person and one company, an individual that didn't end up losing a lot of money, and let's try to figure out how that happened. The company we're going to be talking about is Manitowoc, which uses steel and aluminum, things like that. And the individual is Carl Icahn, a name that you might have heard before because he was a former special advisor to Donald Trump, who, by the way, really fast, ended up leaving the administration because of concerns of conflicts of interest, which was a prescient position, which we're going to now return to this graphic. He sold $31.3 million of shares in Manitowoc, a company heavily dependent on steel imports, last week. Now, according to a regulatory filing that he put out, he was able to sell his shares for between $32 to $34. After the announcement about the tariffs, it had dropped to $26.37 per share. The value of the shares he sold has since dropped by around $6 million, which means that just due to dumb luck, since he sold the stocks last week, he saved himself $6 million. Carl Icahn, former advisor and close friend of the president, the man who unilaterally decided to do these tariffs. Isn't it interesting how it works out in government these days?
So two more pieces of context on Carl Icahn. So he gave a huge loan to Donald Trump earlier in Trump's career and saved his skin. The other guy who did that was Wilbur Ross, who's now the Commerce Secretary, who, by the way, also pushed for these tariffs. In fact, was the leading person inside the Donald Trump cabinet pushing for these tariffs. Now, I don't know what Wilbur Ross's economic gain in this is or not. We do know Carl Icahn's gain, but they are both close allies of the president, and the president said, well, look, I trust Carl Icahn. And the second piece of context is he talks to these friends and allies all the time. In fact, it greatly frustrates the White House staff and especially the chief of staff that they'll go set positions and then at night, Trump will call all of his buddies and go, what do you think? And in fact, one of the hilarious revelations about the Trump White House was that when they kept searching for who the leaker is, and it turned out it was Trump, because he was calling all his friends and blabbing about everything that happened, and the friends were leaking to the press. So is it possible that Carl Icahn got a call from Donald Trump before he made this decision? And perhaps not even in a nefarious way for Trump. Like, hey, buddy, you're never gonna believe what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a 25% tariff on steel. Carl's like, oh, thank you. Really good to know. I gotta go.
Yeah, and as he's talking to Trump, Trump can hear keyboard keys clicking.
By the way, there are congressional laws against this, right? I mean, at least in Congress, you're not allowed to say outside information about policy that could affect stock prices and stuff like that. This is insider trading, but maybe doesn't fit the exact definition of insider trading. Also, ICANN is another New York billionaire who Trump is friends with and kind of has these shady ties as well. So he's just still remaining within his own New York bubble when he was on The Apprentice and just shuffling those people in and out of the White House with his influence.
Yeah, it's insider trading. It's funny to say Emma's making a point that's interesting because insider trading is typically thought of as coming from inside a company, and then you're sharing proprietary information to those who are not inside the company. In this case, you're sharing public policy, or what will become public policy, with someone who has a vested interest in that policy. It does happen on Capitol Hill. You know, there's no law forcing divestiture in a lot of these different holdings that senators and congressmen have, and they have committees that are actually in charge of many of the corporations and corporate interests that they still maintain, financial interests I'm talking about. So
Tom Price got in trouble for that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so let me just be clear about something. There's no law saying you got to get rid of all of your stocks that you might weigh in on. But to Emma's point, a number of years ago, they passed a law saying, yes, but you can't do, because they were doing it rampant, of course. I know you're going to be shocked to find out the congressman might be corrupt, but they would, before their votes in committee, et cetera, they would then do trades, either buy or sell something, because they knew it was going to have an effect on the economy. So it got so bad that finally there was a lot of public pressure, and they passed a law saying you're not allowed to trade on information that you know, even though you're not inside a company, you're inside the government, and you're going to affect the markets. Now that applies to people in Congress. Whether Donald Trump as president is allowed to do that for a friend is a different question. I mean, we all know ethically that's a terrible thing and you shouldn't do that, and that gives your friends who are billionaires and probably also donors and gave you money earlier in your career an unbelievable advantage, millions of dollars in advantage over everyone else. But it would be interesting to see if it's something that they could investigate to see if Trump broke any rules of the White House or laws in terms of giving that information to Carl Icahn, whether he realized he was giving it away or not.
Yeah, that's why I say it's interesting. It may not pass the litmus test for what is purely insider trading as we think about it.
It toes the line, but it's certainly unethical, as you said. Who knows if there's a statute in place? I mean, we've never seen a president like this who would brazenly do something like this, so I doubt there is a law in place.
Yeah, I mean, look, if I was the president and Mark's my friend and he runs an oil company and I'm going to start a war in the Middle East, which is going to create instability and drive oil prices up, and everybody in the world knows that, and I give Mark a call beforehand going, Mark, I might or might not start dropping bombs in Iraq, if you know what I mean, and then he sells his shares or increases his shares. Come on, that's obviously wrong. Then he has information that other people don't have, and that's the whole point of insider trading as a concept. And so that's what Trump is doing here. By the way, one last thing. Again, I might be being too kind to Donald Trump and saying he doesn't know, he might not know that he's giving Carl Icahn this information that would be really valuable. I say that partly because in not being generous to him, he's not very bright, so he might not realize it. But Carl Icahn is bright. And so not only would he receive that information and know exactly what to do with it, as apparently he did, but he might also plant that idea in Trump's head.
Oh yeah.
So now in this case, I doubt it because Icahn was holding stocks of the companies that would actually go down, right? I think he's just reacting to the information. But if he wanted stuff that he wanted to put into Trump's head, I mean, on those late night calls powered by Quarter Pounder and Jesus, he could be like, oh, Donald, you're gonna let China push you around? I mean, they're just a cute little country. You're not gonna let them do that to you, are you? And then Trump, by the way, wrote on Twitter, I mean, how hard is it to manipulate this guy? In big all cap letters, if you don't have steel, you don't have a country. So I could just call him and be like, Donald, you want a country, don't you?
Yeah, and really fast, I've heard that there have been in the past week or two, there have been ads on some Fox programs sort of pushing for a policy change on this to protect the steel industry.
Oh, there you go.
They know that he's going to be watching.
And doubly real fast, a lot of the more recent Trump projects, I'm talking about building projects, have used, as we probably detailed on this on TYT many times, overwhelmingly imported steel. So, I mean, his buildings, his structures, those Trump landmarks, that's imported steel you're looking at.
Yeah. Oh, we take our first break. Lots more to get to.
Sure, and we've got. That was our just an appetizer of corruption. When we come back, the entree. We are actually the longest running daily stream on the planet. Later tonight, we start a revolution. Yes, another one.
I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Too strong.
You're not answering the question. Answer the question.
No one is above the law, and that includes the President of the United States of America.
Go, engage, fire.
Congrats to the Young Turks. They actually won a Stream the Award tonight.
We'd like to thank Donald Trump, obviously. We just crossed 7.6 billion views.
Revolution won't be televised.
Hello, Internet.
I am the least anti-Semitic person that you've ever seen. I think there's blame on both sides.
Oh, these politicians, they're the worst.
They had these beautiful soft towels.
It's just so wrong.
They took your wealth and redistributed it to them.
The government's robbing you, and they're distracting you with fucking nonsense.
Fake news, the enemy of the people. Nobody knew that healthcare could be so complicated.
I can't speak as dumb as he understands.
The market will be destroyed by this plan, and 45 million people will be left without insurance.
They will be met with fire and fury. We've just launched 59 missiles.
MSNBC shows the bombs taking off, and Al Jazeera shows you when they land.
The profiling and the Muslim bans have begun.
Today, my father and brother await deportation.
Horrific act of violence in Charlottesville. I want you to see what hate looks like in America.
What a sick country we live in.
It's time to get up and fight back.
Giant protests against Donald Trump.
Women's marches take over more than 500 cities across the United States.
Immigrants throughout the United States who protest. I don't think they're peasants. I actually think that they enrich this country with their culture.
I don't want a resistance. I want a revolution.
History is not on your side.
Your fundamental principle is flawed.
This is outrageous. It's unethical. It's bad government. And frankly, it's fucking, corruption.
We work together as a community and we stand up for each other.
A total solar eclipse. Oh my God.
Climate change is my #1 issue, and to be able to help amplify the message and research of these workers is like a dream come true.
Colin Kaepernick chose to sit during the national anthem to protest police violence against African Americans. This has sparked a new movement.
More and more women are sharing their stories of sexual assault.
It's happening right in front of our eyes as the culture is shifting.
We have to speak up ourselves, and we have to create movements ourselves.
To see it unfolding in real time as women stand up together collectively and go no more.
So many women came out of that women's march and said, I'm running for office.
You want to talk about the revolution? Here it is. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
TYT.
Young Turks.
You do have the power to change people, you do. I hope one day we can all learn to live together in a decent way and not let, oftentimes, the media and the corrupt established system tear us apart.
Back on the Young Turks, Beth Havens writes in, John, it's Friday, loosen the noose on your neck a little, but like the beard.
Thank you. We had to do photos, I had to wear ties, so I kept the tie on.
No, everybody's all dressed up like they're on their way to a job interview. They're wearing ties and makeup, and it's...
Yeah.
Yeah, Johnny Tie today.
No, I don't like that as much now.
No,
I'm stuck with it.
Captain Jinglepants says, stoked to see Emma Vigeland on the main show.
Hey, thanks, Captain Jigglepants. I can't. That's something I never
Captain
thought I'd say.
Jinglepants.
Thanks so much.
Oh boy. Nick says, spending my birthday watching TYT Live. Woo. There is no other way to spend it, honestly. Well, thank you, Nick. We super appreciate it. Really wonderful of you.
Happy birthday, Nick.
Yeah, and happy birthday. Okay, Revolution hats, they're for members. They've got a nice TYT in the back. I don't know if you can see it. There it is. There's a Revolution. So here's the note I got it. We apparently have less than 50 of these left, so it is in fact time to panic. You got to go to shoptyt.com to get them. Now, but you got to be a member. So members, go to tytnetwork.com/communications. Apparently I said it wrong yesterday. But luckily that's only an incredibly long word. tytnetwork.com/communications to make a purchase if you're a member. If you're not a member, of course, tytnetwork.com/join to become one. All right, John, what's next?
Why is that the URL? Communications.
It makes being a pitchman so much harder for Jack.
Okay, interesting. Well, we're gonna look into it. We're gonna get TYT investigates on it. Okay, Jared Kushner's big week of scandals isn't quite over. We've got Friday and we've got maybe one of the worst parts, actually. It's actually a two-part scandal, so buckle up, Jared. Earlier this week, we were talking about the nearly $500 million in loans that Jared was able to secure for his corporation after a series of meetings with billionaires inside of the White House. Now, that should be enough, but it's not. It's actually worse than that. One of those loans is looking even more suspicious now with new information. So just to remind you about the one we're going to talk about here, the New York Times reported this week that Apollo Global Management made a $184 million loan to Kushner Companies last year, shortly after its chief executive met with Kushner at the White House. Now, what's interesting is some of the other stuff that was going on around that time. According to the AP, Apollo said in its 2018 annual report that the SEC had halted an inquiry into the firm, previously reported that the Obama administration SEC had subpoenaed it for information related to the issue. So under Obama, the SEC had started investigating this company. They meet with Jared Kushner, they give him a loan, and suddenly the SEC isn't interested anymore in investigating what Apollo Global Management had been up to. That seems as quid pro quo-ish as you can possibly have.
It would
be bad enough with the money.
Yes, that's what we were talking about that the other day. It was already terrible with the quid pro quo with, we'll meet with you and then I'll give you a loan, maybe favorable access, but then they drop it at the SEC. The head of the SEC is Jay Clayton, who is a former Wall Street lawyer, represented Goldman Sachs in the bailout, and how they got that money, that bailout money, he represented them. I think Elizabeth Warren during his confirmation hearing said, you are literally the worst person that could ever head the SEC or something along those lines. I'm definitely paraphrasing, but Jay Clayton is not someone who's going to be cracking the whip on Apollo or any major company that's doing shady things behind the scenes.
Yeah. So, of course, the Kushner family says, oh, he was meeting with the Apollo guys? Well, color us surprised. Okay. They say, well, he's not technically with the company anymore. I mean, all of our family money is tied in the company, but he's not technically with the company anymore. And the SEC says, oh, he was meeting with Apollo right before we dropped a case against him. Well, color us surprised as well. Huh, what a wonderful, unfortunate coincidence.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coincidences in the Trump administration.
There's been a lot of coincidences about Jared Kushner lately. It's possible that it's just the coincidental outcome of a lot of investigations all happening at the same time, or it could be aided from inside of the White House. I mean, this information isn't coming out of nowhere. Someone is releasing it. And each component of the Jared Kushner story, we say this all the time, I apologize, we should just put it on the sound bank. If it had happened under Obama, it would be the biggest scandal for both of his terms. But here, it is entirely possible that Jared just skates. I don't know that it's gonna happen. The Wall Street Journal had an editorial calling for Jared and Ivanka to step down, which means that the people behind the Wall Street Journal were in favor of that position. And we know that Kelly is escalating his feud against them, and this certainly doesn't look good. But all of these scandals, one after the other, you know what, I'm gonna throw one more on. You might look at Jared, at this picture of him looking all sad and think, I don't really care if I cross that guy. but you might want to, because look at what happened to someone who didn't go along with his deal. The Intercept reported on Friday that Kushner companies tried unsuccessfully to lobby Qatari finance minister Al-Sharif Al-Ahmadi to try to secure an investment for its troubled property at 666 Fifth Avenue in New York City. 1 month after Qatar's government turned down the loan request, the company found itself blockaded by a group of nations led by Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and Kushner was reportedly a driving force inside the administration of supporting the blockade.
And that property is, has 30% on occupancy. Like it's not completely occupied, and in addition to that, it has a $1.2 billion mortgage.
It's their arguably most distressed investment, and so desperate for some kind of investment. You can see Kushner's were trying to make all kinds of deals, and this is 2 points. Excuse me. First, to John's point, which is, could Kushner skate on this? Yeah. We've seen Donald Trump sort of circle the wagons around people closest to him, and Kushner would be one of them. Although this just appears to be, he's a train wreck of conflict, Jared Kushner, and this is pay to play. I mean, this, you don't need to connect many dots at all to see the conflict here, and he just is a conflicted member of this administration.
This is exactly why you shouldn't have conflicts of interest floating out there, because it gives, at a bare minimum, the appearance of corruption. So I think it's more than an appearance, but no one can argue that there isn't an appearance of corruption, because look, Citigroup wants two things. There's two different groups that were giving loans to Kushner companies. One was Citigroup, one was Apollo Management. Citigroup wanted two things: lower taxes and deregulation of the financial industry. What did Kushner push for? Lower taxes and deregulation of the financial industry. All right, that already doesn't look good, but you can say, hey, that's the Republican position. Then you turn to Apollo. What did Apollo want? Well, Apollo also wanted lower taxes, but most importantly, they wanted a very special loophole for private equity companies to be maintained. Now, Trump had said that he was not going to keep that loophole. So that is not a standard position that the Trump administration had. Somehow they changed that position. Now, okay, well, Kushner's met many times with the founder of Apollo, and then the Apollo group says, oh, the loan we gave them went through standard process. The founder was not aware of it. The founder was not aware of a $158 million loan as he met with Kushner over and over again. So they wanted the loophole, they got the loophole. That was change in policy. Now on top of that, they had an SEC investigation dropped shortly after the meeting. Come on, if that's not the appearance of corruption, you're trying not to see it. But if you're look, progressives get it, independents get it. We don't have to talk about that anymore. But even if you're a Trump voter, isn't this the exact swamp you were worried about? And you know it is.
Yeah. The problem is that if you're a Trump voter, you're probably you're unlikely to have heard about this, because I can't say that Fox News hasn't covered Jared Kushner's scandals this week. They have, for 22 seconds. As analysis by Media Matters. That's how long they covered. Again, this would have brought the Barack Obama administration to a screeching halt if one of his people had done this.
It would have brought any administration to a screeching halt. This is insane.
It's historic level corruption.
And to Cenk's point on the size of that loan and suggesting that some kind of going through some sort of routine process, this is 3 times as big a loan as they normally issue. So this would get the attention of everybody at the top of this corporation. It seems nakedly clear that Jared Kushner is using this office for his own benefit.
Yeah.
Someone needs to do some sort of psychological analysis into Ivanka Trump, because she has married her father. She has married a man who consistently fails and does not do good business deals, works in the real estate industry, and always goes around what is legal, what is right to do, and goes to do it. I mean, in the transition, he was lobbying people in Russia to essentially veto or stall the vote on the United Nations condemning the settlements in Israel. He was already getting started in the transition going after that. So from start to finish, his tenure in the White House has been completely corrupt, much like his father-in-law.
Last quick point about that, and you point out the relationship and parallel between those two. There's something else going on here in this administration, and you see it played out with the Jared thing and with the Trump thing, of course, and that is these are very rich people who are used to not having to play by the rules that the rest of us play by. And That is the way the society's set up. Rich people don't have to play by the rules of the rest of it. We kind of know that. But to see it played out in such a high wire act way as with this administration is scary, because the repercussions are massive for all of us now. It's not just some contractor he's stiffing. These are rules they're not playing by that affect all of us as Americans.
Yeah. You want to turn now to another topic? Switch it up a little bit? Okay. Ever since Donald Trump announced that he was going to be massively removing protections for state-sized sections of national monuments and just cutting them down to, in some cases, 50% their original size, in some cases to 10% of their original size, we knew that it was likely this was done to benefit oil companies, mining companies, people who wanted to drill for uranium and things like that. And they didn't care if it destroyed Native American sacred sites and all of that. They wanted to sell off America's resources to the highest bidder, or perhaps just one of their friends. We've suspected that, but now we actually have internal Interior Department emails confirming that that was what was going on behind the scenes. These documents were obtained thanks to a New York Times lawsuit, so thankfully for them, we have this information. They were able to compile something like 25,000 emails. Now, the bulk of the documents that were made public, about 20,000 of them, 20,000 pages, detail the effort by the Obama administration to create these new monuments, including receiving input through email from environmental groups, Indian tribes, state officials, members of Congress. And during that time, just as point of comparison, Obama created or expanded 29 national monuments during his tenure, representing a total of about 553 million acres, which, just for the record, is the most that any president has. Less now that they've been cut down to size. But what was going on was that soon after the inauguration, Senator Orrin Hatch started pushing for reductions in the size of these national monuments. And he started sending information to the Interior Department about maps of potential sites of resources that could be exploited. So Zinke, who was heading up at that point, his staff developed a series of estimates on the value of coal that could potentially be mined from a section of Grand Staircase, one of the two main monuments we're talking about, called the Kaiparowitz Plateau. And that's basically just a repetition of what we said. Now, that plateau, though, located within the monument, contains one of the largest coal deposits in the United States, according to an Interior Department memo issued in spring of last year. 11.36 billion tons are technologically recoverable, it projected. Now, that is not the sort of load of resources that they're going to just lay there in the ground. And so, not long after Donald Trump made his move, he cut down sections of the monument, and it turns out that the initial map that Senator Orrin Hatch sent out mapped very closely to the eventual map that Donald Trump removed protections for. We have some more information, but that's the gist of it, that they had been talking about exploitation of uranium, coal, natural gas, oil, and things of that sort at the time for months.
Sounds like it's a uranium controversy.
Sounds like Sean Hannity's gonna be all over it.
Oh, I'm sure Fox News can't stop talking about this. So I think all administrations, Republican and Democratic, should meet with everyone. So I'm not outraged that they would meet with business leaders who would have mining interests. So you should meet with environmentalists, tribal leaders, but also business interests. So that's not the question to me. The question to me is, okay, but did you then follow what the business interests told you to do fairly closely? And or did you say, okay, well, I hear you guys, and hey, look, if we take like 15% of this area, and then you would have access to the mining, but we wouldn't disturb the tribal area, and then largely keep the environment intact, et cetera. And maybe the Republicans take away 35% of the park, and Democrats would only take away 10%. Those are the conversations that I think are reasonable to have, right? Trump, instead, as John pointed out, Hatch sends them a memo going, all right, here it's 85%, and here is the whole map of where the reserves are. And they go, yep, done. Okay, wherever the reserves are, all of a sudden is not public land anymore. So it didn't look like there was much balancing here. It looked like they were told this is where the companies want to mine, and then they said, yeah, why don't we just make those private and let them take our stuff? And by the way, are we getting the adequate amount of money that for what was public land? So if you're going to mine there, are we taking most of the profit? Because that's our uranium, that's our coal, that was public land, a couple of weeks ago before you made this decision. Now all of a sudden they get to keep the profits, and if there's any environmental damage, etc., we get to keep the losses.
Well, similar to what happened with DAPL, when he first got into office, he overturned Obama's decision to not allow the Dakota Access Pipeline to be completed. Trump allowed it to happen, and now there's been over 5 spills. Now he's going after Native people and the environment again with this decision on Bear Ears, just mapping it exactly where they need to mine this coal, which, by the way, is an outdated industry that is not going to exist in a couple of decades, and you're putting tariffs on solar and making sure that jobs in America aren't created with a burgeoning industry, an industry that's going to have a future in the world, leaving us behind so you can essentially play to your base and say, oh, go coal. It's ridiculous. And also Zinke, in only this administration do we know who the Secretary of Interior is, right? Like we're talking about the Secretary, but Zinke has presided over this, he's had a horrific tenure so far. 10 out of 12 of the members of the National Park Advisory Board resigned in January, just out of frustration. They're saying they're not getting anything done, so.
And you know, this is something that's been talked about in other administrations. Obama was being also petitioned to make these changes, to give into big oil, big coal, to these different mining interests, but was able to hold it off. And as Cenk says, you know, there would have been a negotiation probably under whomever, even Hillary, as to what would happen here, but it would certainly be a sliver of the percentage that we're talking about here. This is draconian. And to Emma's point, we're backsliding. We're backsliding into old, dirty energy. And since it doesn't make economic sense anymore, old, dirty energy, we have to prop it up with all these kinds of price supports and tariffs. The whole policy it makes no sense.
And one final from me, as I've pointed out before, and I'll continue to do it, a lot of people have sort of been holding their nose and their breath during the Trump administration, thinking, okay, he's doing a lot of these bad things, but in a few years, Bernie Sanders will run, he'll win, and he can reverse it all, which I think we're glossing over how easy that'll be once he gets into office. But maybe he can do that for some things, certainly. But the problem is that when you drill these sites, you can't undrill them. When you destroy the natural beauty of our country, you can't undestroy it. When you smash these sacred native sites, you can't unsmash them. It doesn't matter if, you know, dream of whoever you want to be president. If they become president, this will still have happened. It will still have been exploited. It'll have been sold out from under us, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately.
And by the way, the companies think about it in the opposite direction. So Energy Fuels Resources Incorporated, who is going to gain the most, it appears from this, thinks you can't take away the profit I already made.
Yeah.
You know, your parks might be destroyed, but I already got that profit, and it's a sad day for you. And then finally, to the point that Emma and Mark were making, you know, they give this illusion that the coal industry is gigantic in this country. And so it makes it seem like, hey guys, you libs, you care about the tribes, I don't care about them because they're not me, I don't care about the environment, and I don't happen to go to that particular park in Utah, so what, man, let's at least get some jobs, right? No, the coal industry only has 160,000 jobs in America. Solar industry has 260,000 jobs. Meanwhile, Donald Trump did a tariff that affects parts that go into solar panels, and it is now going to cost about 23,000 jobs in the solar industry. So between solar and coal, he's cost us jobs. So it ain't about the jobs. That's not what it's about. It's about certain companies that are friendly to the administration saying, give me what I want and play ball. And they do. It is not for our benefit, it's for their benefit.
It's not about economic growth, it's about enriching the industries that already exist and that donate to them and that they are pals with.
Yeah.
All right, we got to take a quick break. We're still not done with corruption, or we're done? Yeah, well.
It's okay, this is just normal corruption from here on out.
Yeah, well, when we come back, at least there's some good folks in the middle of the country fighting back. And I'm encouraged by it. I think you'll be encouraged by it. So let's talk about that when we come back.
T-minus 1 minute till landing. TYT broadcast controllers, listen up. Give me a go, no go for landing. Sound?
Audio is hovering at minus 12 decibels. We're go.
Streaming?
We're go.
Camera crew?
We're go.
Mission control?
We're go.
Snacks. We're good. Iguana. Sir, we are go for landing. Okay, everybody. I want this to go off without a hitch.
Sir? I've been looking over this joke for the past hour, and with the Bannon firing now weeks old and waning interest.
English, Johnson, English. What are you trying to tell me?
This joke isn't going to land, sir.
Okay, everyone. Forget the old plan. From this moment on, we're improvising a new joke.
So this is where the show started, and this is where it was supposed to end. Now the joke was supposed to land here, but that's not gonna happen, obviously. So we need to come up with a new joke. Maybe here?
The hits are dropping, streams are failing, retweets are stunting.
40 seconds. All right, team. We gotta find a way to make this fit into a joke about this that will appeal to them. 30 seconds.
The Trump joke's our safest option. Trying to land a Trump joke after this week's events is a suicide mission.
We are officially out of time. We need to act now.
Sir, I think our best course of action is to let Jink try to land a dad joke.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
All right, everyone, to their stations.
Germany, and some of the creditor nations like Netherlands and Finland.
Cameras, position, social media team.
Brace front follows. 10 seconds. As for the rest of us, all any of us can do now is wait and hope.
This is gonna be the worst disaster TYT has ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I think this will be the finest hour 2 yet.
Giving mood, Angela Merkel's government seems to have signaled pronounced.
Come on, Jink.
Everyone, it's been a pleasure streaming with you.
Greek Prime Minister immediately picked up the phone to Putin and said, "You Putin any money in?" Okay, anyway.
TYT crew, the joke has landed.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk, Mark, Emma, and John with you guys today. Brian Lazaration writes, and I absolutely love the promo for TYT. I wish I could share it. It's probably somewhere on youtube.com/TYT.
/communication.
No, not /communication. All right. Anyway, Rommel J. Guzman says, I think people underestimate Trump. It is true that he has a checkered history, but if he made it this far, the clown must have something up his sleeve.
Yeah, 2 tiny hands.
Yeah, look, I don't want to derail us into a long conversation about that. I agree with you in that he knows how to do marketing, which is just to shamelessly, constantly plug yourself over and over, which other people are too embarrassed to do, right? Constantly run to the cameras, run to the mic, etc. And A/B test the crowd. Okay, if you have no morals and no principles, you can say, I'm for free trade, I'm against free trade. Oh, which one do you like better? Okay, then I'll do that one, right? So that's right. Other people with morals and principles are held back in a way that he is not held back. But other than that, that's all he's got, man. He is dumb as a brick. Any idea that he has some sort of hidden strategy, 3-dimensional chess? Can you play 1-dimensional chess? Okay, trust me, he is incredibly stupid. But anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked. Let's do the next story.
I mean, he played his own PR person on the radio.
Yeah, hi, this is John Miller.
Okay, important news though. All of West Virginia's schools are closed once again now on the 7th day of this ongoing strike as negotiations continue into a number of different issues affecting the teachers there in West Virginia. Also teachers around the country, but in West Virginia, they're fighting back right now. Issues like low pay and especially rising insurance costs there. Now, we thought briefly yesterday that there was a deal, but it didn't actually go through. Earlier this week, the governor announced a plan to raise teachers' salaries by 5%. And state union leaders said teachers would return to work yesterday, but teachers across the state have refused, saying they will not return until the state legislature completes the deal, and counties across the state have kept schools closed. And turns out the teachers, they actually knew something there because the deal didn't go through. The state Senate's Republican majority refused Thursday to take up legislation to give them that 5% raise after 4 years without any raise whatsoever. But at least to their credit, the House had actually passed it. So look, if they'd gone back yesterday to school, they wouldn't have actually gotten the raise, and then there would have been no pressure anymore to do the raise. So thankfully they stuck to their guns, and the strike continues. Now at this point, the strike is leaving 250,000 children out of school, but students are planning to show support. There's a student-led protest in Charleston, actually right about now, considering the times it might have already happened. But the students are thankfully standing with their teachers.
So a lot of the Republican ideology is, I help incredibly rich people, and at some point it trickles down on you. What the teachers are saying is, well, one, I haven't seen it. Two, how about you just help me? Like, you know, you have this grand plan of like, I'll give all the money to the rich and you might get a little piece of it. They're like, look, we're not asking for all the money. We haven't gotten a raise in 4 years. Can we just get a 5% raise after 4 years? And I love that they didn't buy into what the people in power told them. The governor of West Virginia is not to be trusted at all. Governor Justice switched from Democrat to Republican for political expedience. But either way, he'd always served his corporate donors and not the people. And then he made a deal with the unions, and even the unions said, okay, now it's okay, go back to work, everybody, right? Everything's gonna be fine. And the House passed it. And the teachers had an inkling, as John pointed out, that was right. They're like, maybe these scumbags who've been lying to us our entire lives are lying to us again this time. And it turns out they were right, they were lying. And the Senate scuttled the deal. I don't know if that's the agreement they had all along. Like, oh, hey, Republicans in the House, go ahead, pass it 98-1, and the Democrats vote with it too. And then when they go back to work, the suckers will just have the Senate kill it. So no, stay on strike. I love this. People of West Virginia, man, I know you're voting Republican because they told you that that if you don't, you're gonna lose your job and everything's gonna go bad. A lot of you have already lost your job, and you've already lost the raises, and the wages are already miserable. It's not too much to ask for to fight back for you instead of the people at the very top.
And the reason that they're insisting on this 5% is because the pay raise that they had been given didn't cover the increase in their healthcare costs, which is the state healthcare that they've been receiving. So they would be actually getting less money because they're paying more for their healthcare. And I think West Virginia ranks around 48th out of 50th in the country in terms of teacher salaries. So they're really, really low down there. Another state which is in, I think, the bottom 5 is Oklahoma. And there have been reports that some counties have moved to 4-day school weeks because teachers, are taking second jobs at Walmart because they just can't afford it. So let this be a lesson. I mean, I just want to bring it back to at least some positive messaging. If Democrats stick to single payer, this will resonate in places like West Virginia because they say, hey, look, I can't even if I get a little raise, it's not going to cover my health care. I'm going to be making less money than I did before this health insurance kept going up and up and up. So the reason they're sticking to 5% is so that they can actually get a raise. That's how they will get a raise with the healthcare costs going up.
And I think even the most important, and of course, I totally believe in Medicare for all, but I think the most important thing to campaign on is higher wages for you. Not for the rich, and then maybe they share it with you. No, higher wages for you, okay? It's not too much to ask for. And in West Virginia, like for example, Paula Jean Swearengin, who's a Just Democrat, running on, yes, this healthcare costs are out of control. We should do Medicare for all. Medicare works, let us in. but also higher wages for the average person. And it's not too much to ask for to have a job and not to have your streams poisoned. Like the Republicans in West Virginia have captured the state in a way, and they've created Stockholm syndrome. Like, oh no, my abuser has my best interest in mind, and if I don't do what my abuser says, they'll take whatever little amount I have away. Why does West Virginia have to be so poor? Why do your teachers have to get paid the worst? That's not a fact. It's not something that has to happen. It's a thing that was created by the decisions made by the politicians in your state. So why don't you throw the bums out?
Yeah. Now, what's great there is that you see the House went for it, although as we know, maybe they didn't actually mean it. The Senate didn't go for it, but there's a convenient sort of out that miraculously happens this year. It actually happens frequently. It turns out that all 100 seats in the House in West Virginia are up for election this year, along with half the 34 seats in the Senate. And teachers are saying that they're going to pay attention to how people vote, and then they will vote accordingly.
Yeah, you think this will be an election? This might be an election issue, don't you think?
Yeah, possibly. Might be. How many people have kids? Come on.
Yeah. Look, I mentioned the Just Democrats and Paula Jean Swearengin in West Virginia running against a Democrat, Joe Manchin, corporate Democrat, is one of them. Because they don't take corporate PAC money, so you know that they serve you and not their donors. So that the reason we can't trust any of these politicians, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, is because they keep taking that corporate money. And then lo and behold, their solution is give all the money to corporations and we'll worry about you guys later. I love that the teachers are saying, no, you'll worry about us right the hell now. Okay, that's supposed to be the fighting spirit of West Virginia. And finally, if you don't know, there's a little known fact. Governor Jim Justice recently switched from Democrat to Republican because otherwise he would have been a Justice Democrat and we wouldn't have it, so we kicked him out.
I'll look into that. Fact check that one.
All right, there's some chance that's not true.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, guys, everybody check out The Edge with Mark Thompson.
Thank you.
Check out youtube.com/TYT Politics, Emma Bigland, all over the channel, obviously, and so am I.
Yeah.
So and so is Nomiki, of course. Rebel Headquarters Clips goes on TYT Politics, and Emma does a wonderful series about the corporate donations to the politicians, so you know who they actually represent.
Yeah.
So make sure you check all that out. A whole new power panel when we return.
arms up. Balance the reason, calling us young Saddam. Yeah, but we ain't terrorists, Fox News, we bomb ya. Your sticks and stones can't break through this armor. Jake Huger, the recruiter, remove your right-wing nonsense. We fighting with the Cougars, and yes, we don't die, we multiply. An army of supermen, all the rest like Cougars. Right? And our NJ.
All right, drop it. All right, a whole new power panel. Simone Boyce is back. Simone, great to have you.
Thank you.
Katie Halper's back. Great to have you, Katie. Anna Kasparian is still here.
Okay, I see you.
Okay, no,
you know how
do.
I am.
But I'll tell you
Grudges.
what. Yeah, grudges, right?
Hold on to them.
I have not seen your hair that way before.
Armenia thing.
Yeah, we did a fun photo shoot for an upcoming exciting things that are happening at TYT. So that's why my hair is a little different today.
It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's funny, I didn't look up the entire time during the break because I was shuffling papers. I look up, I'm like, oh, that hair is different.
Yeah.
Okay.
You say it's different, but do you like it?
No, I just said it's different.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm just playing. No grudges.
No, it's okay.
No grudges. Okay.
Like when someone says something's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an interesting new look. It's different.
No, it looks great, Anna. It looks great.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Taylor Wall writes in on Twitter, shameless tweet, it's my birthday, please give a member a shout out. Okay. Oh, Taylor, you're a member too. Happy birthday.
Yay.
It's like becoming a thing. That's the second one we did today, okay? And by the way, don't be good progressives. Don't lie and tell me it's your birthday when it's not, okay? So Rafer Madness writes in, no, Rafer, sorry, we've read a lot of your tweets. I gotta go. Control Left, sorry, that was mean. Control Left says, how scared would West Virginia politicians be right now if they had armed all the teachers? Yet another reason why it is an idiotic idea. I hadn't thought of that. If you guys don't know, Ronald Reagan did what Republicans say that they're most against, which you could fill in the blank. Arms deals with hostages, trading arms for hostages, negotiating with terrorists, amnesty, et cetera. But in this case, when he was governor of California, he did very strict gun control. You wanna know why? Because before that, they did not have strict gun control. So black activists walked into the Capitol with weapons, which they were allowed to do. And they were like, and we're done with that. Right. Okay, gun control in California.
When the 3/5 clause was around in the Constitution, then the Second Amendment was okay for black people. But once they got rid of that, I think the Republicans didn't like that application anymore.
Exactly. All right, one last one. Nick Robles writes in on YouTube Super Chat, starting my pediatric residency this July, school and paying debt have me low on resources, but I made it through M4 with some discretionary dollars to invest in TYT. Wow. Thank you. As Senor Dor says, will I miss the money much in a year? Oh, right, he was talking about that in, I think, one of our post games. Oh, when we were talking about ballet and how much I would pay to get out of it.
Yeah.
Don't miss those post games, tytnetwork.com/join. All right, Anna, what do we have?
Okay, let's start off with a little bit of fun. Let's begin with Orrin Hatch. You'd never think that I'd say that, but this is fun. Orrin Hatch was recently speaking at the American Enterprise Institute, and during his speech, he decided to do a little commentary in regard to those who have been supportive of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as it's also known as, and he decided to insult people. Let's have some fun. Let's hear what he had to say.
We also finally did away with the individual mandate tax that was established under that wonderful bill called Obamacare. Now, if you didn't catch on, I was being very sarcastic. That was the stupidest, dumbass bill that I've ever seen. Now, some of you may have loved it. If you do, you are one of the stupidest, dumbass people I've ever met. This was one, and there are a lot of them up there on Capitol Hill from time to time.
So for those who have been supportive of the Affordable Care Act, Orrin Hatch believes that you are a stupid dumbass. And so, he's not seeking re-election. As we know, he has decided to, kind of allow someone else to run for his seat, and Mitt Romney is planning on doing so. But what I think is interesting is that he has a little bit of a history speaking like this, and I'm gonna bring up that history in just a second. But quickly, keep in mind that 54% of Americans do view Obamacare favorably compared to 42% who have an unfavorable view. This is based on a recent survey that was done by the Kaiser Family Foundation. Also, among those polled by Kaiser, the majority are unaware that the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate was repealed. So that's a little unfortunate, because the repeal of the individual mandate will lead to higher premiums. And so hopefully people will be able to connect the dots. Republicans are the ones who wanted to do away with that mandate. But he has apologized because he did face a little bit of backlash due to those comments. He said, "Yesterday I made a poorly worded joke about Obamacare supporters, a joke that was not reflective of my actual feelings toward my friends on the other side. Throughout my term of service, I have always recognized the importance of civility, particularly in engaging with those of different political perspectives." But if you look back 7 years ago, literally 7 years ago today, you will see that Orrin Hatch made similar comments. Take a look.
He is the biggest establishment Republican in the country. Now he's trying to pretend to be populist and hip. So here's what he says to the crowd. Quote, "Every state has different demographics. Every state has different problems. It's good to allow them to work out their own problems rather than a one-size-fits-all federal government dumbass program. It really is an awful piece of crap." Okay, that's awesome. Look, first of all, Hatch hasn't cursed in like 30 years. Okay, I don't know if he curses in private or if he doesn't, but he's a very stiff guy. He's not the kind of guy that goes around dropping F-bombs like Dick Cheney, okay, or Rahm Emanuel. So for him to throw out those curses, he didn't slip up. He's doing it on purpose. He's doing it to be like, "Oh, look at how angry I am. I am so passionate like you Tea Partiers. What a piece of crap that is. I hate Obama."
That's funny. I think I was going to say the same thing this time.
It's so good, you can repeat it.
Right. I think that was back when I was on MSNBC and I was shooting it out of.
Yes, that was when you were in New York.
Yeah, shooting it out of New York. So it's true. He's trying to relate to people, and by the way, he's not. This is bipartisan. A lot of Democrats are now cursing, but like light cursing to appear to be populist because they realize, oh, populism's taking over the country. Now I don't really want to do anything the populists want, like serve the people. So instead, I will replace that with crap and poopy pants. And I'm not offended by what he said. I don't care. So he thinks the people that support Obamacare is dumbasses. So and I think he's a dumbass. We're even. I think civility is overrated. Yeah. You know, you could bomb the hell out of countries and kill a lot of civilians, but if you call someone a dumbass in Washington, you know, you're not in the club anymore. So if we're getting rid of those stupid rules, great. I would like some consistency though, because when Hillary Clinton called Republican voters deplorables, they were like, "Oh, how could you?" So when he calls 54% of the country dumbasses, okay, I guess that should haunt him the rest of his career.
But I think when Hillary Clinton did say that, it was disgusting. I think
Really?
Yeah,
I don't think so at all. I think they are deplorable.
I don't think you can paint with such broad brushstrokes about an entire group of people without even talking to them or knowing.
Well, I have talked to them. I've talked to them online over and over again. So, and Simone, let me be clear. Exactly as Hillary Clinton said, not all Republicans. She said about half of Trump's voters are deplorable. People leave that part out that she said half. And the other half you can actually talk to and convince and actually have real concerns about the economy, et cetera. It was actually one of the best statements, in my opinion, she's made.
It wasn't good for getting out the vote, I would say. It wasn't a good get out the vote sound bite, I think.
No, I even disagree with that.
Really?
So we're already having fun, lots of disagreements on the panel.
Yeah.
The reason why I think it could have worked if she hadn't backpedaled and panicked about it is, yeah, I am the Democratic candidate. I am opposed to the Republican politicians and to the voters who vote that way, and so let's get it on. And so if she had that fighting attitude, she might have won. And so, yeah.
I think she should have directed it at the politicians, not at potential voters or the people. I also think, I think that if she had run more like the what difference does it make candidate, you remember how she spoke at the Benghazi hearings, and as most people know, I'm a major Bernie bro, so I say that with take this with a grain of salt. But that, I think, is how she should have run. So I agree with you that if she had had more of a fighting spirit, she would have related to the base more. I think she would have lost people who already hate her and think and find her uncomfortable for gender reasons. They would have been gone anyway. But I think that kind of attitude would have excited people. So I agree with you on that. But I agree with you on the idea that it's probably not a good thing to kind of insult a bunch of people. I think it just feeds into Democrats being smug, elitist, out of touch. And
I just think it's interesting that there's this double standard, right? And so look, I think in any other election, I would agree that it's not the right way to go about it to, say disparaging things about the opponent's supporters. However, in the Trump era, and especially during the campaign, when you consider the type of rhetoric that they used when they were attacking her, and when you consider the type of rhetoric that Trump himself used in attacking other women, for some reason they get a pass, right?
Oh, but don't we want politicians who are above that? Don't we want politicians who set a higher bar?
We're past that era. That's gone. It's over. And I think maybe that's something that's sad and something that we should really consider, reverting back to. But I think that her deplorable comment was accurate.
Well, we're talking about two things, right? We're talking about strategy, tactics on the one hand, and then we're talking about like moral, ethical questions on the other. I think that what I do think is really important to underline, and you were saying this about civility being overrated, is that I don't care if you speak in a nice, sweet, diplomatic way while you're depriving people of their health care, right? I would rather you be gruff and crude and fighting for people's literal lives, right? Fighting to give people health care, than you be polite and also literally depriving people of life, right? And I think that civility can be weaponized often in a way to cover up what you're doing. And it's actually, I find that much more disgusting than the saying a dumbass thing.
Well, the irony of this comment is that Orrin Hatch was actually calling some conservatives and some Republicans stupid, dumbass people because Tomi Lahren was on Obamacare. And there were several governors in red states who were reticent to support certain repeal actions because they felt like it had the chance of negatively impacting their constituents' health. So again, for me, I never think it's wise to generalize so broadly. And I think it just makes him look it makes him look not wise, I would say, and that's why he had to walk these comments back.
I actually think the comments that he made weren't, in an attempt to reach out to
right, he's not running for re-election.
He's not running for re-election. I really think that he's genuine in thinking of these people as so-called dumbasses. I think that, he has nothing to lose. I'm surprised he even apologized, right? I don't think he cares about appealing to anyone right now.
So it's fascinating how much we disagree on this issue in a lot of different ways. So, but I do agree with Simone that he could have been offending a lot of Republicans because he was speaking at a right-wing think tank. Now, it happened to be American Enterprise Institute.
Right.
But I had to recheck. I was like, wait, was he at Heritage Foundation? Because if he was speaking at the right-wing think tank of Heritage Foundation, they're the ones who came up with the plan in the first place.
Yeah, Romney Care, right? Style,
It was the right-wing think tank, then Romney Care, then Obama adopted it. So it was initially a Republican plan, so he's in a sense calling Republicans that came up with that plan dumbasses. But look, one more thing to Katie's point, civility, if everyone is civil and no one is too harsh, what it does is it protects the status quo.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And so the people in power and people with privilege want to protect the status quo. So that's why they value civility. So I'm not just saying that you shouldn't value civility at all. And I don't want people to rip each other's faces off and stuff, but when you overvalue civility, it is usually to say, hey, everybody pipe down. You're a little too excited. Oh, somebody doesn't have health care. Oh, we bomb civilians. Don't get so worked up, okay? Just keep going with what we're doing right now.
Yeah, it's decorum over actual policy.
But are we then saying that bipartisanship can't or shouldn't exist in our current climate?
Well, it 100% depends, okay? Depends on what they agree to. So right now, unfortunately, over the last several decades, bipartisanship has meant we both agree to what our corporate donors want. So if you look at what they agreed to, it is almost always to the advantage of the rich and powerful. Look at what they just agreed to. I mean, in a sense, to be fair, a lot of Democrats, most of the Democrats voted against it. but tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. But in the past, just magically, whenever the Democrats are in charge or Republicans in charge, the only thing they can agree to is tax cuts for the rich. Under Bush, there was tax cuts for the rich. Under Obama, there was the appearance of rolling that back a little bit, but he actually only rolled back 6% of that revenue. 94% of that revenue actually became permanent. The tax cuts for the rich became permanent under Obama. They sunset under Bush. Then you go to Trump, again, they agree on tax cuts for the rich. It's not a coincidence. Now, on the other hand, Simone, if we had a clean system, one that was not drenched in money and private financing of elections, then I would love bipartisanship, because then they would try to be serving their voters. And to your point, Simone, most of the voters, not all, obviously we disagree on that, but most of the voters do agree. If you look at all the issues, usually they're above 60% agreement. Protect Social Security, protect Medicare, higher wages, and you go down the list. But those are the things that the politicians today all vote against.
Right. When Sanders involved, I'm going to say it's a good bipartisan effort. That's my litmus test. And yes, I have litmus tests. Just before anyone accuses me of having a litmus test, I own litmus tests. We all have litmus tests. It's just a question of what they are and whether or not we own that we have them.
Yeah.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, I will tell you the story of a baseball coach who decided to discriminate against any potential recruits from the state of Colorado. Why? You don't want to miss it.
I have decided that I'm going to get ripped. Okay.
What?
Okay.
Like physically?
Yeah. Okay. What? You don't believe me?
I 100% don't believe you.
I will get so ripped, here's my prediction, that someone at TYT will say, Cenk, you've got to stop working out.
We're tired of you winning.
So you don't believe me?
Cenk, you don't have time to like do your daily duties for the main show.
Duties. I don't even have time for your daily duties. Because what you guys don't know is how great my muscles already are.
It's absolutely possible, but you can't have Leah run to the food truck to get you like 2 different types of grilled cheeses with like tater tots for lunch. Like you can't have that anymore.
Let's see what happens.
You also have to go to the gym regularly.
Let's see what happens. All I'm saying is, let's see what happens. Have I ever been wrong about a prediction? Almost never.
All right, this time of the day when I talk to you about aspiration.com. You know, earlier in the show we were talking about how they're gonna mine coal, and there's only 160,000 jobs in coal. There's 260,000 jobs in solar, and they're taking away our public lands to do it. So almost all the major banks put your money into fossil fuel companies, coal companies, private prisons, gun companies. That's why I love these libs. Aspiration.com, they don't put your money in any of that stuff. In fact, they give away 10% of their revenue to charity. But what you get out of it is no monthly service fee, the highest interest rate in the market, no minimum monthly balance, no minimum monthly deposits. So they're looking out for you, they're looking out for the environment. And so I literally don't know why you wouldn't go when they offer you the highest interest rate, plus none of those fees. You never get charged at any ATM. So aspiration.com, feel good about where you put your money. back on the Young Turks. By the way, of course, I just introduced our guest hosts, just like you all know them, and some of you do. But Simone Boyce is on KTLA 5 here in LA doing morning news, but she's also reporter for Mike.com. So that means everybody can check you out no matter where they live.
Exactly. Yeah, working on some issues that are pertinent to women, young women right now. So check it out, Mike.com.
All right, excellent. And Katie does the Katie Halper Show, which is not surprising.
Very creatively named.
That's right. It took months to name it. WBAI and podcast, so everybody can just check out the podcast. And you got a movie coming out, Commie Camp?
Yeah, we're going to release it soon. Yes.
All right. Looking forward to it. That sounds good. It sounds fun. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. A baseball coach in Texas has made the decision to refuse recruits from a specific state. Mike Jeffcoat is his name, and he believes that anyone coming from Colorado is super suspect, so it's probably better to not bring them on his team to begin with. Now, he sent an email to a team prospect, someone who wanted to join his college baseball team, and he responded with the following. The email was sent by this baseball coach, Mike Jeffcoat, from his university account and has since been posted on Twitter. The message to the aspiring college athlete at Cherokee Trail High School states that Texas Wesleyan, a private school in Fort Worth, no longer recruits players from the state of Colorado because of drug problems. Okay, let's stop for a second. Understand that this recruit has never met the guy, has never undergone any type of drug test, nothing like that. The letter back to him, or the email back to him, said the following: unfortunately, we are not recruiting players from the state of Colorado. In the past, players have had trouble passing our drug test. We have made a decision to not take a chance on student athletes from your state. You can thank your liberal politicians. Best of luck wherever you decide to play.
Hilariously preposterous. The kid's coach in high school had to clarify, he's never had any problem, no disciplinary problem, never a single issue. Like the poor kid now, like it creates like this presumption of guilt on him just because he's from the state of Colorado.
It's insane.
And you have no idea if the kid's a liberal or a conservative. He's probably, since he's under 18, never voted. You don't know what his parents think. I mean, what if he's like an evangelical Christian from Colorado? Is Colorado Springs?
Right.
It's one of the most evangelical places in the whole country.
Maybe he's straight edge.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And he's probably a great athlete because Colorado, you do all these things outside. Right. It's a beautiful state. Yeah, I mean, it's just textbook discrimination. That's really what it is. And the funny thing is, this coach is actually being investigated for something else, some sort of violation of this National Collegiate Athletic Association, violation of their rules. Now, they didn't specify what that violation is, but clearly, I mean, not someone that you really want to have on your staff.
I mean, he doesn't sound like the type of person who would sit down and really think about his actions before he takes action. I mean, what kind of judgment is this?
I know.
It's crazy, and it seems like he's just this bitter conservative guy who's just trying to insult anyone who has anything to do with liberals. Again, we don't know anything about this kid's political leanings. We don't know anything about his drug use. Besides which, I'm curious to give Jeffcoat a drug test and see, whether or not he's ever, taken advantage of a nice spliff after work.
Let's give him a hair test, just so that we get the whole history.
It's regional profiling, right? It's not racial profiling. It's like state-based.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This story apparently went viral, although I didn't really see it anywhere myself. I saw it on cron.com, but that's it. I mean, I haven't seen this widely reported. I feel like if a liberal did the exact same thing, let's say a liberal did this, a liberal in California, a coach in California, did this against an athlete from West Virginia.
No, they'd be fired
immediately. It's done. Not only would they be fired immediately, it would be Fox News. It would be 24-hour coverage on Fox News.
Protests. Right?
Yeah, and I don't want people to misunderstand what I was saying earlier. I'm like, you have no idea if this kid happens to be liberal or conservative, and you're just, He might be the most conservative kid in the world, and you're not letting him in because of the liberal politicians of Colorado. But so what if he was liberal? Who cares? Can he hit the ball or can't he hit the ball? And why are you bringing politics into this when it makes no sense at all? And by the way, I would want the coach fired if he was in California and he's like, all right, since you're from the state of Alabama, I'm not accepting you. Well, there's two more layers to that. One, it's discrimination and it's wrong. But two, you're not very bright if that is how you're picking your baseball players, based on which state they're from and whatever politicians are in that state. Okay, so I'm progressive, so should I not take any baseball players from Texas? That would be pretty foolish, right?
Instead of giving them like a drug test, you should give them a voting test, right? You should ask them like who they voted for the last election, if they're a voting age.
Yeah, and by the way, ironically, and it doesn't make sense because Mike Jeffcoat is very conservative, but was a very good baseball player back in the day. He was in the majors, and so if I had done the same test as him, like you're a conservative, I'm not taking you. Then I wouldn't have taken a really good baseball player.
It also shows just a terrible, like you said, lack of judgment to say this stuff out loud, to put it down in writing. You get that he would think that maybe, but it shows a real lack of judgment and also abuse of power. So I wouldn't want him being in this position anyway.
Yeah, and one last thing to Anna's point, there is a double standard here, where if progressives say, who would want anything or anyone from Alabama or Mississippi? They go, oh, how could you? Kansas, right? That's the heartland, that's real America, right? Whereas conservatives are like, oh, Massachusetts. And O'Reilly once said the terrorists should blow up the Coy Tower in San Francisco.
Right.
And so now apparently Colorado's not real America, right? So they get to attack progressive states all the time. And it's not right either way.
Right. All right, moving on to some other news. Recently, Vladimir Putin decided to show off some of the new nuclear capabilities that Russia has. In fact, while he was doing so, he demonstrated how this new nuclear capability could target the state of Florida and potentially destroy it. Now, interestingly enough, there wasn't much of a reaction or any reaction from Donald Trump, and that was fascinating considering who he decided to attack rather than focus on giving some response to what Putin has been saying. Now, Putin unveiled a new hypersonic intercontinental ballistic missile, which cannot be shot down by anti-missile systems, by the way. He did this Thursday during his annual address to Russia's Federal Assembly in Moscow. Now, he was quoted as saying, other countries listen to Russia only when it comes out with new weapons. You will listen to us now. He showed a video of nuclear missiles raining down on what appeared to be Florida's Tampa Bay area, home of the US military's Central Command. So, like no one's making this up. This happened, okay? There's no like DNC member or DCCC member who's, using a hologram of Putin to make this up. He did this, he said this, and there was no response from the White House. It was kind of amazing. Now, one of Trump's spokespeople said, we're not going to react to every word or idea that world leaders express. It was the State Department spokeswoman, Heather Nauert. And also she said, it was certainly unfortunate to have watched the video animation that depicted a nuclear attack on the United States. We don't regard that as the behavior of a responsible international player. But Trump's reaction has been pretty much no reaction. And it's strange because he usually reacts to any type of provocation. Now, he did, though, get into a Twitter fight with Alec Baldwin. He said the following: Alec Baldwin, whose dying mediocre career was saved by his terrible impersonation of me on SNL, now says playing me was agony. Alec, it was agony for those who were forced to watch. Bring back Daryl Hammond, funnier and far greater talent, and a far greater talent. So I'm glad that he's doing commentary on the issues that really matter.
Yeah, I was, as Putin was demonstrating how he could destroy our U.S. Central Command, I was happy to hear that Daryl Hammond was back in the news, because that's really the thing that we need to be discussing. Where is Daryl Hammond? So look, do I want the U.S. president to fly off the handle and be like, then we're gonna attack him? No, I don't.
That's not necessary.
Yeah, I don't. But has Trump done that in the past in other situations?
But
yes.
I get that there's a lack of consistency, but I have to say I'd way prefer him fighting with Alec Baldwin on Twitter than saying provocative things, as is his wont when he's talking to world leaders about to Putin. And this is one of the things that I really find puzzling about the Russiagate discussion, which is, what is the end game? Like, what is it that people want to have happen? Do people want Donald Trump to strongly condemn Putin, nuclear power, and in his usual kind of disrespectful, hyperbolic, insane way, so that what happens? So that Putin and Trump escalate things? Do they want?
That'd be awesome.
You know, like what?
No,
What's the?
of course that's not. Well, I can answer that question.
Okay.
It's got a very clear answer. So, look, first let's note the difference, because when North Korea didn't demonstrate how they would destroy the U.S., but said something.
Sure.
He's Rocket Man, we're gonna destroy you, we're gonna pulverize you, we're gonna kill everybody in North Korea. So that is how he normally reacts.
Right. So let me give you some examples, okay? Because look, and let me be clear about one thing. I do not want him to react to Russia the way he has reacted to North Korea. The way he's reacted to North Korea is dangerous, reckless, immature, juvenile. I mean, I can't think of enough words to describe how incredibly damaging that could have potentially been. And I'm lucky that things have calmed down since then. I'm happy things have calmed down since then.
Lucky, yeah.
But at the same time, the reason why I think it's important to highlight this story is, look, when it comes to the sanctions that Congress passed in regard to Russia, he hasn't implemented them, refuses to implement them, refuses to ever criticize Russia. And then we have this act of provocation from Putin, no statement from Trump whatsoever. Again, it's not that I want a statement from him so much as I want to know that he is keeping the country safe from all bad actors. And I feel like he has this really interesting bias in Putin's favor, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't want to engage in war with Russia. I just want to make sure that the country is safe. So if they're creating nuclear capabilities that are so advanced that our anti-missile systems wouldn't work against it, are we doing anything to stop that? Like, are we doing anything to respond to that? And also, are we doing anything to prevent meddling by Russia or any other foreign country in the future so we can protect our elections? He's not doing anything like that. He has no interest in it. So that's what my issue is. And by the way, when it comes to North Korea, here are some examples of Trump's tweets. He said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear bottom is on his desk at all times.
But bottom would have been awesome too.
Yeah, it would have been.
Well, okay. Nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. Okay, so there's more examples. I have plenty of them. It's just, again, a weird difference in how he reacts to North Korea versus Russia.
And inconsistency,
right,
for sure. And I think anyone can acknowledge that it's troubling that he chose to tweet about Alec Baldwin over this. And we know that he watches Fox and Friends quite religiously, and we know that a lot of his tweets, his Twitter rants, come from things that are discussed on that show. Right. And Alec Baldwin was discussed on Fox and Friends, and then an hour later, Trump tweeted about him. But Condoleezza Rice was also on Fox and Friends later that morning and she actually voluntarily discussed this animation that Putin put out of this nuke hitting Tampa, and he chose not to tweet about that. So there's clearly a disconnect
I'm not really looking forward to Condoleezza Rice commenting on this either.
But it just shows that she's a Republican figure who's very knowledgeable about this topic, and she is able to speak about it. Why can't he speak about it?
No, but I mean, she should. To me, it's like there's been this whole rehabilitation also of Bush and the Bush administration, and I think that Condoleezza Rice, as someone who insisted on WMDs and said that there was no evidence that 9/11 was going to happen, despite the presidential daily briefing that said, what was it, Osama bin Laden likely to attack the United States. I mean, I think that that's a scary sign of kind of historical or short-term historical memory, or how Trump's existence and how his kind of horrendous personality and policies have made everyone else who I think should still be persona non grata, honestly. He's kind of rehabilitated everyone by contrast. And all these people who the left used to see, as they should, as villains, right, are now seen as honorable people.
So, but if people in the Republican Party are able to talk about Putin disparagingly, why can't he when that is an appropriate response?
So let me get to the answer that you asked for earlier. So Katie, as usual, I agree with a lot of what you're saying because we're both deeply progressive. So I don't want him to be bellicose towards Russia. I don't think that is necessarily productive. Even Alec Baldwin, in his tweets counter to Trump, talked about, I'd rather vote, I would want Mitt Romney back or something like that. No, I don't want Mitt Romney back. I don't want George W. Bush back. And so, and Bush actually did a war that killed all those people. Right. So I hear you on all that. But so what is it that people are looking for? We're looking for some sort of sign that Donald Trump is not in the tank for Russia.
Right.
It's not because I want him to go to war with Russia. It's not because I want him to even create more hostilities or do any of the stupid tweets he does with North Korea. It's that I want to have some degree of certainty that he's not in the pocket of another country.
Right.
Now, people might think that that's overblown. I don't think it's overblown at all. I think that Donald Trump, there's excellent evidence already externally that we can see with our own eyes that I've talked about and that have been reported on, that Donald Trump did money laundering for the Russians for decades, okay? Now, if he did do that, like the election interference is important because they went to the voter registration. They broke in 22 states. And if they didn't get to the actual votes as far as we know, but if we don't do anything about it, then they might get to the voter rolls. And it might be China, I mean, it might be Russia, it might be China, it might be someone else. So we have to act. And Mike Rogers, the National Security Agency director, said, Trump has not ordered me to do anything.
Right.
So now, and if he actually, whether it's money laundering or anything else, if he is beholden to Putin for some reason, then he's not going to take the precautions that a president who represents us should take. That is deeply troubling. So I'm not worried that he didn't tweet about this in particular. I'm worried that he never, ever criticizes Putin from a guy who will criticize Alec Baldwin and everyone on the, Rosie O'Donnell, everyone on the planet but Putin. To me, it is exceedingly clear that there is one, in one of the articles here, they said, Trump rarely criticized Putin. No, he never criticizes Putin. And he hasn't done the sanction, he hasn't done anything with, and that doesn't mean that I think the sanctions are wonderful.
Right.
It's just obvious that there is something going on with Putin and Trump, and hence I'm not sure that Trump represents our interests above Putin's.
But do you think that like our national security state would really let
well, they're not letting him. They're going all over TV going, watch out,
right.
He's not doing anything about Russia.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I think that my concern, and I hear what you're saying, my concern is that a lot of the hashtag resistance is focusing on Russia in a way that actually will just make it easier for some kind of war to happen and for the public to be kind of massaged and ready for that to go, because there's so much. And I find a lot of, you guys aren't doing this, but there's a lot of like Russophobic language, and we saw this with Jen Palmieri, who tweeted about getting into a cab with a driver with a Russian name, and if she goes missing, look for this car. And I see a lot of scary tendencies.
Oh,
yeah. She gave the make of the car.
I just look, and I feel like it's unfortunate because people who are reasonable on this issue get stuck in no man's land, as Cenk and I often say, because look, there are plenty of people who are not interested in, getting involved in a war. I certainly don't want to start a new war, but what I'm more concerned about, again, as Cenk said, is having a leader who has our best interests in mind and making sure that we protect ourselves. I mean, yes, Russia's an issue, but from any foreign country that might want to do something to impact our democratic process. And also, I want to make sure that we do have what's necessary to protect us when it comes to these weapons. We can't have, Putin showing us like, hey, look at this nuclear weapon I have. It could wipe out the state of Texas or Florida, and your anti-missile defense can't stop it. That is a scary situation to live in, especially if you have a president who's influenced by that leader.
Yeah, and so last thing on this, just to double down on what Katie's saying about the over sensationalizing it about, unfortunately, a lot of cable news, is like if
MSNBC. It's the only thing I talk about.
Yeah, if I never watch cable news, so that's why I have a slightly different perspective than other people. For people who watch cable news, if you're vomiting Russia, I totally get it. Like, Jesus, can you do a segment that isn't about Russia, right? So you're right about that, and you're right about forces driving more militaristic responses, which we don't want. But that shouldn't cloud our judgment at the same time, so that we can't see that clearly Donald Trump doesn't want to do something about Russia, and it's for a reason he hasn't stated publicly.
Seems like a real missed opportunity for another bigger button tweet. I mean, it's like right. It's like
it's right there.
It's right there. Come on.
And you would do it in any other circumstance unless it's his daddy.
Right.
Yeah. All right, we got to take a break, unfortunately, but we will be back in a few minutes. And when we do come back, turns out there's some new technology that could be able to read our minds. I'll give you the details.
It's not BS.
Putin,
it's amazing.
Can you use on Putin?
Oh no, well, let's use it on Trump. Find out what his real intentions are. All right, we'll be right back.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze.
Yes.
Froze and crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts. And it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Hey, Cenk, what's up?
Hi, Aaron. I'm confused. Is it Cenk Uygur or Cenk Uygur? Go.
Look, we're doing interviews over there at youtube.com/TYT interviews, and we've done some amazing ones recently. So now, of course, you know the person most widely considered to be the most progressive senator is Bernie Sanders. Yeah. Why not back him during the 2016 primaries? Why be a Democrat at all?
And we're in the time where you cannot, in good conscience, sit on the sidelines of history in 2017. Right.
back on the Young Turks. Simone, Cenk, Katie, and Anna with you guys on this Friday Power Panel. Just time for one comment. Nick Robles again on YouTube Super Chat says, onward, Brent Welder, with another $20 about yesterday's post-game discussion on the viciousness of humanity. All that is human is not foreign to me, said a dope Roman playwright around 100 BC. Interesting. And we had a really interesting discussion in the post-game last night about are humans vicious? So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member, support the show, get it ad-free anytime you want, and get the post games. Anna Gressberg as a Van Old School. Okay, speaking of Brent Welder, he's the politician in Kansas who is uncorrupted and a TYT member. Let's check in on the fundraising drive for him. That's wonderful, 30,442. You know what, here's what I'm gonna ask for. Can we get that to, forget the dollar amount, just to 1,350 donors? It doesn't matter what you give. Give $1, give $3, give $10, whatever you can. 1,350 by the end of the show. I know it's asking for a lot, but let's see what we can do. So he's a TYT, current TYT member, watches the show, and he's beating the Republican in his race, the incumbent Kevin Yoder, by 7 points. So that could be Congressman Brent Welder real soon. All right, what do you got, Anna?
All right. Researchers from Toronto have developed a way to read our minds, sort of. But this advanced technology is essentially setting the groundwork in order to create what is necessary to help people who are paralyzed to communicate if they are having difficulty speaking. So that's the upside of it. But of course, if this technology is advanced to the point where people could read anyone's minds, it could be abused. But first, let me tell you where we're at the moment when it comes to being able to read people's minds. Now, the researchers have developed a technique that can produce a digital image of what a person is picturing in their mind simply by reading the electrical activity of their brain. Now, how did they do this? Well, the researchers hooked up the volunteers to EEG via electrodes placed on their heads. They then showed the participants the faces of 140 individuals one by one on the computer screen while recording their brain activity. So they're looking at these images on a computer screen. The electrodes that are connected to their head is basically measuring the activity of their brains. And then this is where things get super interesting. On a computer installed with special machine learning algorithms, the team recreated the images of the faces that the participants were looking at using the data recorded by the EEG. Essentially, the algorithm searched for brain signals related to the mental image that the volunteers were holding in their mind and reproduced it as a digital image. So think about it this way. They look at images on a computer screen, someone's face, for instance, in this case, and then later on, through the data that was recorded through the EEG, the scientists were able to recreate what these individuals saw in those images, right? Like, so it wasn't perfect, but what was fascinating is how accurate it was compared to, let's say, how a person would describe a person's face later on.
Yeah. So when I first saw the headline, I was like, not buying it. I know we get all these futuristic articles, and sometimes people get carried away. Now they're going to be able to read your mind. And when's the holodeck coming? Okay, that's the thing I'm interested in. And sometimes people promise that, and I still ain't here, right? But when I read how they described how they did it, I was like, oh, yeah, that'll work. Okay, so, but the key here is they show you the images and then record the electric activity in your head so that when they see that same pattern in your head, they know what the image is. So don't let them record your head in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm serious.
Wear foil. Everybody has to wear the foil
We're gonna be the same
now.
people, the ones who wear the foil hats.
Yeah.
So this is literally an episode of Black Mirror. And it was for me personally, it was the scariest episode. But it's the same kind of situation where in order for someone to read your mind, they have to put some gadget on your head. So you're right, don't let people put gadgets on your head. Just don't let it happen.
No, because it has begun. And they say the pictures are not bad and better than memory. And they say, look, it could really help people. That's true, that's how it always starts. So if, for example, if you can't speak, they can show you the images, record how your brain receives those images, and then whenever you think that again, it will show that image to someone. So in a sense, you are speaking to them. The problem is you can't contain it. So if you just are, they recorded all those images,
right,
and you didn't want to think about that cute girl at the mall, but then it came to your head, and then your girlfriend is, right, one of 1,000 different problems that it could create.
Yeah.
And so it could be used for good, but then once the genie's out of the bottle.
Could be really helpful in the Time's Up and Me Too movement. I mean, you could just have a ton of evidence there for sexual harassment in the workplace, but I mean, there's a lot of ways in which this could be abused. It starts to feel like transfer of consciousness is not too far away after this.
I hate all of this. I'm sorry. I do. I don't like any of it. I see how it could potentially be good, but just doing a quick cost-benefit analysis and knowing how technology already gets abused and used against us, I just don't want any of this.
Well, look, first of all, we don't have a choice because we could try to stop it, it won't work. Somebody else, somewhere else in the world would be like, that's like your opinion, man, but we're gonna go ahead and do it in this country, and then it'll spread and spread, and you can't stop technology. But I like the spin that Simone put on it as a part-time transcendentalist and Taoist, that if we then use this to share consciousness in a sense, then we all become one.
Buddhist surveillance.
Yeah.
I like it.
The NSA starts, they're like, oh, Taoism, I like this. But the one good thing, seriously, is that if we all find out what each other are thinking, in the beginning, there's gonna be madness and terrible things that people find out, like, what in the world, right? And then probably, hopefully at some point, people go, oh, so everybody was thinking it.
Right.
No, but what about just having a little bit of like self-intimacy? I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but privacy.
That sounds fun, but
I mean,
and illegal in some states.
Like I feel like every part of us, especially right now, it has to be shared with the world at all times.
There's
Like
a lot of oversharing.
exactly. The
TMI.
only thing that we have left is our own thoughts, and the idea of letting go of that, it terrifies me. I want to have something left for me,
The overlap of social media and this, whatever that would look like, that's very scary.
It is.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then you have no privacy left, and you can't even be alone in your head. And by the way, then the last part of that is, then they will begin to judge your thoughts.
Right.
And
yeah,
we can't
like
have
Jimmy
that,
Carter.
man.
Jimmy Carter, remember?
Yeah.
The lust in his heart.
I definitely draw the line on thoughts. You're allowed to have whatever thought you want in your head.
It could do so much good though, right? For people with medically
handicapped.
Yeah. I'm with Anna. Let's burn it.
No, I mean,
Don't let them put that on your head.
People living on the fringes of society who are going to start rejecting technology in every sense, just because it's already. I see so many ways in which social media has made our democracy even more fragile, than it was, and I think that we're getting to a point where it's already happening. We're not getting to the point. We are at that point where technology is ripping us apart in a lot of ways. So I think we might see people reverting back to, I don't know, wagons and horseback. I mean, just as sort of a rebellion, a revolt against this lifestyle.
Neo-Luddites, right?
Yeah.
It's funny that
they're the real problem in government.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I used to never like going to secluded places. Like I never liked camping or anything like that until about 2 years ago. I started like craving it. I'm like, I want to go to Joshua Tree. I want to be in the middle of nowhere. I don't want to talk to anyone. And I think technology has something to do with that.
Totally.
All right, we're out of time. So everybody check out Simone on KTLA and Mike.com. Check out Katie Halper on the Katie Halper Show. Go get the podcast and become a member at tytnetwork.com/join so you can get this full show if you missed any part of it. Have a wonderful weekend. And I think that's all we got for you guys, all right? Here's what we do. We go like this and we go bye-bye, which I never tell anyone ahead of time. But here we go. Ready? Bye-bye.